If you're running a weekly game, especially a sandbox game, it can be a big time commitment. For me, I feel like I'm doing just-in-time preparation to stay one step ahead of the players every week. You've got to be able to manage your time wisely and focus on the right things. Today, I'm going to share my game prep techniques that also help me limit my prep time. We talk about work-life balance. Well, there's game life balance too. We're all busy. I'm running 2 ShadowDark games. I've got a wife, kids, career, now apparently a YouTube channel. I'm writing some adventures for an upcoming gaming convention. So my weekly game prep time is limited. I have to be smart about how I use it. In my day job, I'm an IT leader, so I brought over a few techniques from that world that work well for me. I believe you'll find something useful here too. If we had no constraints, this is what my sandbox game would look like. I'd spend a couple years building it, hire hundreds of developers and designers, have tons of handcrafted dungeons and detailed holds and quests and all sorts of stuff. Obviously, I'm talking about Skyrim, which to me is always going to be the platonic ideal of what the perfect sandbox game or open world could look like. I know it's a video game, but I always use it as the measuring stick for how I feel like my sandbox game could look. Unfortunately, we live in a real world with constraints. And this is something I've ported over from project management. They call it the Iron Triangle. These 3 things are the constraints that limit what you can build. They are resources, scope, and time. Resources, in this case, that's one of us. It's the person creating the campaign. Scope is what you're building. It's a lot different if you're doing a simple 5-room dungeon as opposed to trying to write a 30-room dungeon level or perhaps a mega dungeon. And time is pretty self-explanatory. And none of us can really break the laws of physics. Your 5-room dungeon is going to take a different amount of time and require different resources than that 10-level mega dungeon. But at least for our sandbox campaigns, there are a few techniques I use that help manage these constraints. First word of warning though, when you're starting your initial campaign, and actually anytime you're starting something significant and new in your campaign, not just when you're getting started out, there will be a big spike of activity. This is a typical sandbox methodology. If I'm starting a brand new campaign, I might start with a fresh sheet of hex paper, sketch out what the kingdom's going to look like, make some notes about the politics and the ruler and what the history is, briefly outline the major points of interest. That could be cities, villages, towns, maybe some of the most famous adventuring sites. You're going to detail a home base and then craft a starting adventure. Typically, I give myself several weeks to kick off a new campaign. So that's what I mean when I say there's kind of a spike of activity to get started. Then once your campaign gets rolling, I want the maintenance to get down to, I don't know, somewhere between 1 and 4 hours per week. And for me, I usually try to target 2 hours per campaign or so. The first constraint we'll tackle is the time constraint. The technique I like to use is the time box. And if you're in the corporate world, you've probably encountered this. You set a time limit. We're not going to spend more than X amount of time on a task. I first like to think about what's the level of detail and what do I need to get done. So the level of detail for sandboxing for me, I always think, is what I'm doing wide and shallow, or is it narrow and deep? So if the players are going cross country and they're going to cover a lot of ground in the session, and also I'm not 100% sure exactly where they're going to go, that's wide and shallow. We've got to cover a lot of ground, but we only want to be like an inch deep on all of it because some of the content might not be used. If I know the players are going to a specific layer or dungeon or point of interest or site, I can get a lot deeper and a lot more detailed preparing just for that one thing. And for time boxing to be effective, I like to think, okay, what are all the different things I need to do in this 2-hour block, and make sure I get to all of them. That's where the concept of boarding house rules comes in. I don't know if you've heard that before. It means everybody gets in a line and you make sure that Everybody gets a serving of food once before someone comes through the line and gets seconds. So if I know the players could encounter 5 or 6 different things, I want to make sure in my time box I get to all of them and don't spend like an inordinate amount of time on number 1, for instance. And putting a time box around things creates a sense of urgency. Let's take a quick example from a recent game session. So this Karameikos, this is where I was placing my B5 Horror on the Hill game. That particular group, we started this back in the fall. They just finished. So they were up in Guido's Fort in the upper left corner of the map. In a recent game session, they had said, hey, we're going to go to the capital city. They had an audience with the Duke. And I kind of knew the route they were going to take. So this is an example where my time box prep was going to be wide and shallow. I needed to think about encounters on the river, the trade caravan they might be traveling with, what each of those stops along the way was going to be like. Riverfort Keep, Luln, Radleb Keep. What's the audience going to be like with the Duke in the capital city? What were encounters along the way? Whether I established a few important points of interest and plot hooks. For instance, in the Blight Swamp in the Achelos Woods, just south of Riverfort Keep, there's a huge green dragon marauding the area. That's a future opportunity for the players. They encountered a griffin's nest in the hills north of Luln. They heard about the haunted keep. That's just east of Luln. And even though they didn't stop and do anything with those particular plot hooks, they did add them to their quest log, and they were able to reach Specularum in one night. So this is an example where we were wide and shallow. I think I got all that prep done in about 2 hours. The next constraint to tackle is resources. That's you or me, the person running the campaign who's got to do the weekly prep. We're not able to clone ourselves, so for the most part, we bear the load. However, we can use outsourcing. And in this context, hiring a contractor means flashing some money and going and getting a published adventure. There are some very talented writers who have put out OSR adventures. Very easy to convert those to whatever OSR-like game you're using. And you've spent some time on my channel. You know, I'm really partial to the old TSR adventures from the 1980s or Gary Gygax's adventures from the 1970s. So I love looking for opportunities to put them into my campaign setting. And if you think about it, what you're doing when you grab a published adventure is that someone else spent months building this very detailed, professionally written adventure with editing and high quality maps. And you get to just read it, take advantage of that, and it's a force multiplier for you and your campaign. Now, there's still a little bit of effort. You got to read the module, break it down, understand what's going on, sometimes make notes or do some highlighting, and then file off the serial numbers. Do whatever you need to do to localize or adapt it to your setting. Continuing with this Grand Duchy of Karameikos theme. So I recently read Nightmare over Ragged Hollow. It's an OSR adventure by Joseph R. Lewis. It's really well done. I would love to put that here. Either one of the villages in Karameikos, kind of in the north, like Verge or Penhaligon, could easily be Ragged Hollow. Obviously, I wouldn't call them Ragged Hollow. I'd call them Verge. Ragged Hollow featured a temple and a paladin. The temple becomes a church of Karameikos. The paladin becomes a knight of Karameikos. And I'd probably have to go through and see if there's other localization that would happen. But that would be a great way to kick off a future first level campaign. Likewise, outside of Kelvin, there's a moor. I know that there's tombs there and barrows. There's an old mega dungeon for, I think, Labyrinth Lord called Barrow Maze. I could just take Barrow Maze and plop it right into Kelvin and have a mega dungeon in Karameikos. Those are just two really simple examples how you can expand the depth of your campaign with some judicious outsourcing. And this is the one I'd pay the most attention to because I think you'll get the most mileage out of this, is managing scope. And the technique I use is making the campaign player-driven. So the player-driven campaign means that the players have to keep some kind of a quest log. Now, I call them quests. You may call them rumors or plot hooks or missions, all the same thing. The idea, especially with a new group, is you should signpost when things the players are learning, when that is a plot hook or a rumor or something that's going to lead to adventure. Players don't just come out of the womb as 20th level D&D players, especially newer folks or folks coming from other games like 5e. You're going to need to encourage them what it means to take the reins of the campaign when they pass by a dragon lair south of your River Fort Keep, or they see Griffin's Nest, or they hear about the Haunted Keep. Have them put that kind of stuff in their quest log. So when they're thinking about their next mission or what they want to do, it's the players themselves that are looking at everything that they've learned about the campaign world and trying to make decisions about where they want to go next. And the crucial technique I find is talking about it at the end of every game session. So stop 5 or 10 minutes early, especially if you've just finished something major and there's an opportunity for the players to go in a new direction, and ask them, what do you want to do next week? Because when the players tell you, when they look at their quest log and figure out what their next goal is, they are effectively telling you, hey, here's the box of scope that you need to work on in between game sessions to be ready for next week. And depending on what it is, if it's cross-country travel, then you know we're probably wide and shallow. If it's we finally want to go and take a look at the Haunted Keep, then you know, okay, it's probably more narrow and deep. I get to build out that Haunted Keep. And this is very much in line with West Marches style gaming. If you're playing a West Marches game, you don't even schedule the next game session. The players, in theory, are supposed to reach out to the referee when they're ready and tell the referee, hey, we want to have a next game session and we want to go to the Haunted Keep. I will say, for at least one of my campaigns, the players will frequently chat throughout the week and have a players chat. And then usually by Friday, if they've changed their mind on what they want to do, they at least let me know so that ahead of my weekend game prep, I kind of know what that scope box looks like. Remember, perfect is the enemy of the good. It's not about being perfect. It's about being ready for game night. So use these techniques to help manage your scope. Understand if you're in a wide world or a narrow world. Employ time boxing to make sure you get to everything that you need to in your prep time. Leverage those player discussions to limit the box, the amount of scope you need to build. You can even flash some budget and go deploy some published materials to your campaign world. Hey, I do want to make a quick shout out to some other YouTubers. This Sandbox video was inspired by something I saw over on Save versus BS. I've become a fan of the Erudite DM, as well as William over at Runeforged Tabletop Gaming. They all seem to have an interest in ShadowDark. It's strange the way the algorithm works. These things just kind of filter up to my dashboard. I've been following the Informal Gamer as well. I'll put some links to all these channels below. If there is a favorite ShadowDark oriented or OSR oriented channel that you know of, I'd love to hear about it. It'll help all of us with the algorithm and maybe turn me on to some new creators. I hope these techniques today were either helpful, interesting, or ideally both. I guess if it helps one viewer, my work here is done. If you made it this far, thanks. Please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.